Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to this epic series following the River Tweed from its source all the way down to Berwick upon Tweed, where it has its estuary. A warm welcome back to all my regular viewers, and a warm hello to anyone here for the first time. Today we are looking at Melrose, and it's quite a significant border town, and I'm doing this narrative almost at the end of the episode, if you follow what I mean, because the structure behind me is such an iconic a part of the Tweed, and it of course is the Leaderfoot viaduct. If there's any background interruptions, by the way, they're busy doing some repairs to the old road bridge, which I'll mention shortly, so my apologies for that if it interrupts the narrative. Anyway, let's crack on with the episode. This episode marks a very significant change and point in our journey down the Tweed, because it's from here down to Berwick that we enter the last third of the journey, and we are now in the Lower Tweed section of the river. So you'll see the landscape change. Gone are the steep-sided valleys, and it's replaced with a more rolling landscape, and eventually when we get to Berwick, of course you have the Eastern Marches, which has no hills at all. So as I say, the start of a significant part in our journey. This section includes some well-loved and known border towns, namely Kelso, Howick, Coldstream, and of course Berwick. Today though, we are concentrating on Melrose, a very beautiful border town renowned for its abbey, but also the location of a significant Roman fort. This episode begins where we left off in the last episode, where Gallowwater forms its confluence with the Tweed in the shadow of Gallowfoot Bridge, built in 1975. It carries the main road from the south over the Tweed into Galashiels. Only half a mile downriver lies a quite different bridge, built 126 years earlier in 1849, called the Red Bridge Viaduct. It was built for the North British Railway to carry the Waverley to Carlisle line over the Tweed, and closed in 1969 as part of the Beeching Cuts. Today it provides a river crossing for the Southern Upland Way, a walkway spanning the borders from Port Patrick on the west coast to Coburn's Path on the east coast. The river bends around in a wide inverted U-shape, circumnavigating the modern settlement of Tweedbank. House building began here in the early 1970s, added to each decade by various housing associations. Today, Tweedbank is the site of the biggest industrial estate in the region, and also the terminus of the Borders rail link with Edinburgh. As the Tweed leaves Tweedbank, it passes beneath another attractive bridge known as Melrose Bridge, sometimes called Lowood Bridge. The bridge was built in 1762 and carries the B6374 over the river, connecting Melrose to Galashiels. After the Tweed has turned a few more corners, we reach the border town of Melrose, situated on the south bank of the river. Immediately opposite, on the north bank of the river, lies a small village called Gattonside. The land here was granted to the monks of Melrose Abbey by David I in 1143. A very striking building is situated here, known as Gattonside House, which was built in 1810. It was built for James Brown, a Jamaican coffee plantation owner. But more interestingly, in 1821, it belonged to Sir Adam Ferguson, the keeper of the Scottish regalia mentioned in episode 7. Gattonside is linked to Melrose across the river by an iron suspension bridge built in 1826. Its use is for pedestrians only and had to be rebuilt in 1991. A much sturdier construction replaced the earlier flimsy yet more graceful design. The settlement of Melrose was originally known as Fordell. The name of Melrose was substituted in 1136 when the abbey was relocated from Old Melrose, which is 2 miles downriver to the east. At this point, the Tweed once again forms a tight crescent meander, creating a peninsula surrounded on 3 sides by the river. This area is called Old Melrose today. The etymology of Melrose in the Scots Gaelic language is Melros, which means bald peninsula. In the ancient Brittonic language, it's Melros, meaning the projection of a meadow. The first abbey was built on this peninsula in the 6th century, founded by St Aidan of Lindisfarne. If you recall from the Northumberland series, the rivers of that time were the main highways. So the fact that the Tweed exits into the North Sea, literally only a few miles from Lindisfarne, made it ideal and an easy connection between this area and Lindisfarne. You might also recall that Cuthbert, who followed Aidan at Lindisfarne, was born in Melrose, and he was actually the prior at the abbey in 662 before later moving to Lindisfarne. When David I became king in Scotland in 1124, he wanted to build a new Cistercian monastery on the same site. However, the monks preferred the site further west, known as Fordell. The Melrose Abbey ruins we see today was the abbey built by David I in 1136, and the first Cistercian abbey in Scotland. The Cistercian order split from the original Benedictine order in 1098. They followed the rules of St Benedict more strictly than the Benedictine monks did. The Benedictine order wore black cowls and the Cistercian order wore white. The wealth and importance of the abbey grew as each successive king came to the throne, gaining more land and money. Waltov of Melrose, the stepson of King David, made the abbey equal in importance to Rievaulx Abbey and Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire as a centre for sanctity and learning. That is why important historical documents were ratified and signed at Melrose Abbey and mentioned in the Magna Carta of 1215. Melrose lay on the main route south from Edinburgh and so was vulnerable to attacks over the centuries. As mentioned in the tributary episode on the Ettrick, Melrose Abbey was burned down by Edward II's army on a failed mission into Scotland as they retreated, and they did that out of revenge. Much of Melrose town was destroyed as well. Robert the Bruce had the abbey rebuilt, and it is said that his heart is buried at the abbey in a casket. The abbey was attacked several more times throughout its history, but war damage led to gradual deterioration. The last abbot here was James Stewart, the illegitimate son of James V, and the last monk to live here died in 1590. The town of Melrose shared the fortunes and woes of the abbey throughout its time, and after it closed as a working monastery, Melrose fell into decline. It was Walter Scott who was partly responsible for its revival, with a new interest in Gothic architecture. It was he who introduced tourism to the town. Along with the tourists came people of means who invested in the town, making it into a busy market town. With the neighbouring towns all prospering from the Victorian Industrial Revolution, Melrose too benefited from the boost in trade. In 1846, a station was built by John Miller, mentioned in the Leithen Water episode of Leithen Hope House. The station building looked more like a mansion house rather than a railway station, and was designed specifically to attract visitors. It is sited overlooking the town, the abbey and the Tweed. The station was part of the North British Railway line from Edinburgh to Howick. 20 years later, the line was extended from Howick to Carlisle and renamed the Waverley route after Walter Scott's novel Waverley, which has nothing at all to do with railways, by the way. The novel tells the story of an English soldier involved in the Jacobite rebellion of 1745. The line closed in 1969, and while most stations on that route were demolished, Melrose Station survived until the 1980s, though very run down and vandalised. An attempt was made in 1985 to restore the station, but unfortunately it was too late, as plans had been passed for the A6091 Melrose bypass. One of the platforms and the station building has been preserved, and today enjoys Grade 1 protected status. As you drive along the bypass, the remaining platform is at the side of the road. The station building houses a restaurant, a model railway museum, craft shop and craft workshops. The town is made up of architecturally pleasant buildings in a picturesque setting, ideally set out for the day tripper. Parking can be a bit of an issue though, so if you intend to visit, I suggest you arrive early. In one of Melrose's attractive streets is home to the Trimontium Roman Museum, dedicated to the Roman fort at Newstead, known as Trimontium. Trium in Latin is 3 and Montium means mountains, the fort of the 3 mountains, referring to the 3 hills that make up the Eildon Hills as they are known today. Eildon Hill North, as it is known, is the one that towers over the present town of Melrose. Not only were these hills the site of a Bronze Age hill fort dating back to 1000 BC, but it is thought they formed the capital of the Selgovi tribe, who occupied the border region, and I've mentioned this particular tribe many times so far. The 3 hills are unusual and not formed in the same way as the surrounding hills were formed. These are almost certainly laccoliths. A laccolith is formed when molten lava moves upward from the Earth's core, forcing the softer layers of rock above to buckle in a dome shape. If this intrusion was able to go all the way to the surface, it would form a volcano. These domes of intrusive rocks remained deep beneath the surface and cooled over millions of years. In an equally vast period of time, the softer rock above was weathered away, leaving these dome-shaped laccoliths protruding above the ground. Before I move on, though, it is worth speaking about the Romans and the Roman presence in Scotland, because a lot of people still accept the myth that the Roman Empire ended at Hadrian's Wall. And of course, the empire did not end there. When the Romans invaded the southeast of Britain in 43 AD, they needed time to consolidate their forces before expanding north. It was in 79 AD that the Romans began moving north under the command of General Agricola. The Votadini tribes in Northumbria cooperated with the Romans, as I've reported before. However, the Brigantes to the west and the tribes occupying the southwest of Scotland tried to repel the invading forces. Nonetheless, these tribes were not successful in keeping the Romans out. By 84 AD, General Agricola had established forts along the southern edge of the Highlands, from Greenock to Stonehaven. Deer Street, the main road north connecting Eberacombe, York, to Elginhof, Edinburgh, was extended to supply these forts. Deer Street ran right through Trimontium and then north using the Leader Valley. When Agricola was recalled to Rome in 84 AD, reportedly because his achievements in Britain had outshone those of the Emperor Domitian, the Roman forces withdrew to a more defensible line on the Forth Clyde Valley, constantly suffering attacks from the Highland Pict tribes. By 130 AD, the Romans had retreated back behind Hadrian's Wall, leaving a few outposts north of the wall, Trimontium being the largest and most northerly. It is thought that the fort at Trimontium was deserted by 180 AD. There has been a Trimontium Museum in Melrose for over 30 years, and it displays a lot of the artefacts found in an excavation carried out between 1905 and 1910 by a local lawyer and amateur archaeologist, Dr. James Curl. With help from the National Heritage Lottery Fund, the South of Scotland Enterprise and Live Borders, Trimontium has developed into an award-winning museum. This is well worth a visit, and there's a link to their website in the video description below the video. We've been granted permission to see inside, so let's go and do that now.
Hello, my name is Thania and I'm the Heritage Environment Resources Officer here at the Trimontium Museum in Melrose in the Scottish Borders. Trimontium was founded in the late 80s by a group of volunteers, by a group of very interested people who wanted to save the site of the Trimontium fort from being destroyed basically by the construction of the Melrose bypass. They did know that there was a very important archaeological site there that has been known since 1846 when the site was discovered, when the railway was being constructed, was being built. So they got together and formed a trust to safeguard this very important heritage site. And the museum was born from there. But in 2021, we opened with a brand new museum, with a new redevelopment, with a new interpretation, with loans from National Museums of Scotland, as well as our own collection and loans from Live Borders. So we have a fantastic new museum in this site. The artifacts are supported by fantastic interpretation with audiovisuals and interactives and films, and those are always very well regarded by our visitors. It is mostly manned by volunteers, and volunteers are at the heart of everything that we do. Volunteers also bring all their knowledge, their local knowledge, and their warmth to welcome visitors to the museum. They are all also very well regarded, and they receive always 5 stars with our reviewers on TripAdvisor and Google, and anywhere that you see. As well as a museum, we now have a new extension that opened 2 years ago. And in this new extension, last year we opened with a new virtual reality experience, and that is unique in the Borders, and I will say unique in Scotland. In this virtual reality experience, you get to go to the fort as it once was, welcomed by Lucius Maximus Gaetolicus, a real centurion that lived here 2,000 years ago. And you get to explore the fort again as it once was. There's also films in that, and you get an immersive experience that is supported by all these fantastic artifacts. We also run events, workshops, festivals, and many other things. So we are here to welcome you anytime that you can stop by.
I would like to say many thanks to Thania and the staff at the museum for allowing us in to film and their support and help. The building that the museum is housed in is known as the Ormiston Institute, built in 1882 at the bequest of Charles Walter Ormiston. He was a Melrosian who worked locally as a nurseryman, as his father did before him. It was built for the betterment of the local residents, where they could meet, learn and hold events, very similar to the Chambers Institute we saw in Peebles. The building also provides a home to the local registrar's office. On the front of the building is a magnificent memorial clock, which was added later. It was erected thanks to subscriptions provided by the grateful patients of a respected surgeon and physician in Melrose called John Michael. Also based in Melrose is the Merlin Academy of Traditional Music. It was first opened in 2011 and initially focused on traditional folk, blues and acoustic music. It has since expanded its curriculum to include pop, jazz and country music. The Academy offers individual and group lessons, as well as having an online teaching facility for all ages. Events such as concerts, workshops and a summer camp are just some of the Academy's activities. Before we leave the market town of Melrose, it would be remiss of me not to mention that Melrose, of course, is the birthplace of the Rugby Sevens competition. Every year in April, the famous Melrose Sevens event is held at Melrose Rugby Union Ground. And for those not into rugby, then maybe the Borders Book Festival held in June might suit you better. Past events have seen Michael Palin, Jermaine Greer and Ian Rankin attend. As is the case with all of the border towns, Melrose has its week-long festival in mid-June with the appointment of the Melrosian and his queen, and of course the common riding. In addition to all of that, there is an annual Eildon Three-Hill race and also the Melrose Pipe Band Championships, attracting pipers from all over the world. So much to experience in this idyllic border town. I've been talking about the abbeys and the Romans, the Tweed has continued to meander its way past Melrose for about 1.5 miles until it reaches Newstead. This settlement has the title of being the oldest continually inhabited place in Scotland. Its importance derived from its situation on the Roman road Deer Street. The site of the Roman fort lies just on the eastern edge of the village. The village hall was once the village school until 1937. Today it is the only non-residential building in the village. Admiral Sir Henry Fairfax was a major landowner here. On his death in 1900, his widow gave land and set up a trust fund to provide a library and a mission hall for the people of Newstead. None of those buildings are still standing, but a marble bust is displayed in the village hall. The British Olympic sprinter Isabel Barber of the 1952 Games lived in Newstead most of her life. Another famous resident in the recent past was the author Liz Taylor, better known as Elizabeth McNeill, and maybe best known for her novel A Bridge in Time. Immediately south of Newstead as the drone flies, at the end of a gated road, is Rymer's Stone. Thomas the Rymer was born in Earlston, a few miles to the north of here, in 1220. It was claimed he had the gift of prophecy and had apparently predicted the death of Alexander III in 1286, the day before the fateful accident. You will recall that story from episode 5. He also predicted that one day a bridge would cross the Tweed, which would be visible from Eildon Tree, a place he loved to sit. The spot where the tree once stood is where Rymer's Stone is situated. A local legend says while sleeping under this tree, he was visited by a fairy princess, fell in love, and shortly after vanished forever. However, as you will see in the next episode, a grave for Thomas the Rymer is present in Earlston Parish Church. The bridge that Thomas Learmont, to use his real name, was referring to was Leaderfoot Viaduct, and that's the bridge you can see there behind me. And if you're wondering why there's a different background, I've had to move locations because those scaffolders on the other bridge were making so much racket, it was just really affecting the audio on the film here. So apologies for that. This, for me though, this bridge has to be the most spectacular on the Tweed. There is a similar bridge at Berwick, but this one really just takes the crown for me. The bridge has 19 arches, towering 126 feet or 38 metres above the Tweed. It was built in 1863 to carry the Berwick Railway, which connected Reston to St Boswell's via Duns and Greenlaw. In 1948, the Tweed flooded and took out 7 bridges in that route. After the flood, the passenger trains no longer used the bridge, and it was feared too much of a risk to passenger safety. It was only used for freight trains until its total closure in 1965. It was scheduled for demolition until Historic Scotland stepped in, and thank goodness they did, because to me it would have been an absolute travesty to lose such an important piece of architecture. It is now Category A listed and serves as a footbridge across the Tweed. 100 metres downriver is an older bridge called Drygrange Old Bridge and built in 1776. It replaced a ferry crossing in this location as an improvement to a turnpike road. Like its neighbour, it too is only used by pedestrians and cyclists today. The old turnpike road is now the A68, and that crosses the Tweed by a modern box girder bridge built in 1974, which overshadows its predecessor but lacks any finesse. If the Romans at nearby Trimontium were still here today, I'm sure they would have called this spot Tripontium because there are 3 bridges. Within 100 metres, the Tweed is joined by Leaderwater, which we will see in the next episode. Within a further 200 metres is where the Tweed forms a loop, almost coming full circle on itself around the site of the first abbey at Old Melrose. A residential house now stands where that first abbey once stood, called Old Melrose House. Some of the original stones from that first abbey have been incorporated into the walls of the building. as the Tweed flows south for a while, leaving old Melrose, we draw a close on this particular episode. The next episode on the Tweed itself literally starts on the opposite bank of the river, but that is for next time. If you've enjoyed this particular episode, then as per usual, as I always say, then please give it a like. It's the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already done that. Other ways you can help the channel, as I keep saying at the end of all of these videos, is give the link to one friend, one family member, so that they can watch it, or maybe encourage that person to subscribe. That all helps the channel. As usual, if you wish to make a financial donation to the channel, then go to the PayPal link at the top of my homepage. And the best way you can support me is watching the programme right through to the very end, until all the titles have gone and the music has faded away, because only then YouTube record it as a view. So, having said all that, I'll wish you farewell, best wishes, good health, and I'll see you all here on the banks of the Tweed extremely soon. But for now, it's goodbye.